Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sarah Cruz from Embrace Ayurveda, and I have a very special guest and friend here with us today. Grace Bryant is from Be Whole, Be Happy is the name of her business. And Grace is a mentor, a coach, a facilitator on many very interesting topics. And she's also a mother of a young son. And she's so much more than that, but those are a few things I know about her right off the bat. Grace, I'm just so happy to connect and for you to share your wisdom with our viewers today.
Hmm. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for inviting this conversation. I think you and I, as colleagues do, we get to like come together and support each other and co-support students and then be like, but I want actually to know more of you and what you do and for the world to know that. So it's just great to have a little expanded time with you today.
Absolutely. And we met some years ago in Seattle, and you have been so kindly inviting me into your circle to work with some of your clients and your students. And what I've seen so much growth happen in the time I've had with your students. I've seen them really trust you and go deep in the work that you're doing. So, with that as and the impact, that you have on people, I want to share with others, like, what is that magic that you bring? What is it that you offer as a mentor, as a coach, as a facilitator? Like, what is your mission? What are you up to with your work?
Mm. One way that I name my mission is that I love inviting people into the discomfort and shadows of waking up, of self-awareness, of what's here beyond what society has programmed us to see. So you can call that liberation work or getting free or clearing out the cobwebs of our subconscious or knowing ourselves better or being more empowered in the world. I'm a yes to all of that, and I consider myself a Tantra teacher, a classical Tantra teacher, and I think like the real cut and dry motto of Tantra is yes and. Like, yes, this moment is happening. So Tantra is not a spiritual philosophy that's in denial of this realm of reality, the material reality, the emotional reality, the relational reality. Like, yes, this is here. Let's get clear. Let's get truthful about what is and what else. What's the possibility? This moment actually holds every possibility that could possibly exist when me as the subject of that, you and your own experience of that are free enough, unfiltered enough, radically honest about life enough to say yes. So that's what I love. And it's such a challenging process. I just got off with a client and we just kept coming back to this is the hardest thing you'll ever do to choose, to keep choosing, not to go the way of the comfort or the familiar or the collective paradigm or numbing yourself with all the mechanisms of numbing that we have so easily accessible in our culture. Um, and it's incredible. So that's kind of what I love to do through coaching, through mentorship, through classes. And a lot of it is like Tantra, I would say, is my main spiritual tradition that I draw from, but also with access to a lot of other modalities.
Oh, that was so rich what you just shared there. And I love how you help people feel so safe to get radically honest with the work
Mm.
that they're up to, just to get right into the essence of what they can unfold. And when that healing happens, then anything's possible in their life, right?
Right. And that, I mean, thanks for naming that. The piece of the safety is what I so often find. I'm a white, middle class-ish, kind of normal passing, able-bodied American. And spirituality through this culture has been so exclusive, really. Like, okay, if you meet all these criteria, then you're safe enough to be in spiritual spaces. And I'm a big no to that. Like, I actually hold in my body and practically and in my circles that we need to create spaces that are safe enough for as many people as possible, which means that those of us who have been in these, protected paradigms and these um, privileged paradigms, like we have to get more uncomfortable so that folks who are more oppressed and more marginalized can be actually safe enough to be in those paradigms too. So I just wanted to kind of open up that idea of safety, right? That
Yes.
safety is also in how are we holding one another in community? Because that's such a big piece that's missing, especially in this on the other side of COVID world. Um, the isolation is part of what's creating so much distrust and unsafety for people in their getting free.
Wow, absolutely. And in being safe, people are able to then feel vulnerable to then open up, right? And potentially release things that they've been holding and to be in that safe container with a practitioner such as yourself and with a community to see that
Mm.
they're not alone through the challenges or the ways they may have been judging themselves, to identify, to see that others are going through similar struggles. And I love that you have your year-long program. It's a weekly Tantra Sangha, but it goes all year long, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple different offerings. There's what's called the Tantra Immersion, and this is based off some of my home teachings from a school called Hridaya Yoga and Tantra. And Hridaya means the spiritual heart. So it's connecting to consciousness, connecting to spirit, God, divine oneness, this background of awareness that we are, but through the intimacy of our own heart. So the year-long course, we're actually just finishing. We have 2 weeks left of this year-long that we just have been embarking on. And then I'll start another of those programs in September. So that's a closed container for a year. And then in a couple weeks, we'll start this open community gathering online, which I haven't done before since the very beginning of COVID when we kind of rushed everything online and then went, okay, slow down. What do we actually want to create here? So yeah, this will be a weekly offering, open container. Anyone's welcome to drop into any session. There's no, RSVP or commitment needed. And it's just the idea of gathering in Sangha, gathering together for this satsang, this community of truth and the ability to witness each other. One of the places I notice people getting so stuck these days is this idea of or the way the mind goes, I'm the only one. It's only me, right? It's only me trying to throw off this thing and how society's judging this and how isolated I feel and my vulnerabilities and my identities and my oppression and all of this. Like, and of course it's not only you. If we look at these teachings, and I know this is true from Ayurveda as well, like the truth is in these wisdom teachings that were written 5,000 years ago. The struggles might look different in our time, but it's the same, right? Like connecting to the essence of yourself through whatever the practice is the same. So I think when we can witness and inspire and validate and be vulnerable with each other in community, it just totally changes the paradigm. It totally changes the work. So
Mm.
that'll
So
start in a
true.
couple weeks. I'm excited.
So Sangha, the word Sangha is one of my favorite Sanskrit words. I just love
Mhm.
that word and how it embodies so much in that community, that connection, that growth. And were you saying that your Sangha offering, anybody can jump on, like you don't need to be registered in a program to participate?
Yeah,
Okay,
so that'll be an open drop-in offering. You just go sign up for the weekly list so that you'll get a link to the class. But that's it. Yeah, we'll
fantastic.
just do a little brief agreements in every class so folks know what the agreements of being there and how to hold each other as safely as possible.
Yeah. Well, one word I've heard you mention, I know it's at the core of a lot of your work, is Tantra. And
Mm.
for people listening to our conversation, they might be wondering what that word means. Could you share your definition of Tantra, Grace?
Yeah, my teacher, whose name is Sahajananda, he defines Tantra as this very beautiful, simple sentence. Tantra is finding the sacred in the mundane.
Mm.
So it's the process of reawakening ourselves, re-enlivening ourselves, coming into our childlike way of seeing the world, where the world in front of us wakes up. Not because we've gone on some spiritual retreat, not because we become some different person or ended a marriage or had a child or life has changed in these big transformative ways, but because we just peel off all the filters and the obscurations and the grit that makes us go, oh yeah, I'm just brushing my teeth. I got to brush my teeth again, brushing my teeth. And then toothbrushing becomes this life affirming moment of touching the goddess and being in love with every moment. It's a funny analogy, I know, but I used to, before I had a child and I had all the time in the world, I had this toothbrushing ritual that made me so happy. It was like this 4-step toothbrushing ritual. And it was like, it was a ritual. You and I have talked a lot about rituals and the ritualizing of our daily activities and having tea and making food and, abhyanga, rubbing oil on your skin. But this sense of through our own mental relationship and inner attitude, anything that we do and anything we experience can become a divine communion, right?
Yeah.
So that I think is the practice of Tantra. And to me, Tantra is embodied and it's radically embodied. Like Tantra actually asks us to sit with the full spectrum of life, right? With childbirth, with death, with taking a walk in the woods, with having a bath, with sex, with menstruation, with brushing your teeth, with like everything big and small in your body here in this practical world and say, what if this was also truth? What if this was also divine? What if this was also it? It's nowhere else but here. So, how do we uncover the truth and the full presence of this moment through this, whatever this happens to be? So, that's my own motto of yes and. Tantra is what's yes, what's the yes, what's actually happening right now? And how do we want to be in relationship with it?
Yes. Yeah, that radical embodiment, that complete full embodiment. And yeah, and staying with that in the moment without judgment, with the full acceptance, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. So if people are interested in diving deeper and they want to attend your Sangha and they're like, this is really resonating, when is your next group program starting? Have you already mentioned that?
Yeah, so we're just finishing our year long in a couple of weeks here, and then we'll be on a bit of a break, integration time. And then September, right after Labor Day, I think, is when we'll be starting the next one. And there's 2 cohorts. There's a morning time and an evening time. And I think it works pretty well that most time zones can find one of those that works, with kind of a normal daily schedule. And I cap it to about 10 participants in each. So it's a pretty intimate program. I'm not really interested in like, there's 50 people on a Zoom and you don't know anybody, you don't talk to anybody. I think that can feel really isolating. I mean, I've been in very big spiritual communities, but we were in person, right? So you were developing personal relationships, and that's somewhat impossible to do on the internet if you're not actually having time with one another.
And does this
So we
program include some in-person gatherings as well?
It does, yeah. So we do weekly online, and that's hopefully accessible to anybody, no matter where you live. And then about once per module, so there's 5 modules in the course. We'll meet probably in Western Washington. That's been where most of the students are based, but we'll see, depending on where the majority of people are. This is for a 1-day in-person gathering. So we practice together, answer questions, just have some Sangha and some connection.
Mm.
And then there's also a silent retreat. So that's the other piece of what I do is I lead Tantra-inspired silent retreats.
Mm.
And so we do a retreat, 3-day silent retreat as a part of the immersion gathering as well.
Such a rich opportunity to sit in silence for one day is great, but 3 days, I mean, I'm just imagining how much the nervous system drops in and resets and how powerful that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you gotten to do much silent practice?
I haven't done more than a day at a time, especially since becoming a mama. Like, I'm gonna have to carve that into my life because I feel like an extended silence practice would be so good. And I recommend it to my clients, or even during Panchakarma when they're receiving therapies. I suggest if you want to take 1 or more days of silence during these treatments, I highly recommend it. Yeah, so that's in my future, but
Yeah.
I love how you include that in your program, as well as, I've looked over your curriculum in your program, and some of the essence, the teachings of yoga that you include are really some of the best, most essential teachings of yoga, pranayama, and also Ayurveda. The Kitchery
Mhm.
cleanse that you have your clients, your students go on. I've talked to some of them while they're doing their Kitchery cleanse, and they're very excited and they always feel so good afterwards. So yeah, I really love how you include Tantra, yoga, Ayurveda, and then your other essential teachings into this deep program.
Yeah, and the Ayurveda component is really it's really essential. I think Tantra and Ayurveda, obviously they have the same roots, but even that, they're quite parallel practices, right? When I come to you or seeking the support of Ayurvedic practitioners, it's like do the things you already know. Just here's how to implement them in ways that could be supportive to what your constitution needs right now. And so yoga generally, yoga is a more broad framework. Here's all the practices. Here's how to implement them in a more generalized way, or for specific tapas, specific orientations to a chakra, perhaps, or healing, or what life is holding for you. But in Ayurveda, it draws this just very specific, personal, what your body needs right now, and the understanding of what your system is purifying. What are the blockages individually? So that's why I love when my students come and work with you and can get just really dialed in, like, oh, it's this pranayama that's helpful. Oh, it's this time of day. It's this cup of tea. And it might seem like small additions, even you and I met in the winter, kind of the beginning of the winter, and you offered me some specific ways just to turn that dial. And I've noticed like, oh yeah, I added a bit more ghee in. I'm doing abhyanga a little more often. I'm putting cocoa powder in my afternoon coffee. Like, and there, it seems so small, but it is these rituals and how they can deeply impact the body that allows everything else to open up.
Yes.
So I think the combination of that personal aspect of Ayurveda with the Tantra deconditioning and reorientation is imperative.
Yeah, and especially how these sister sciences and their origin and their essence were meant to be practiced together. And I've seen over the years where I've started working with yogis, people who practice yoga or tantra, and they didn't really practice much Ayurveda, but the moment they bring that in, their whole practice expands and becomes even richer. And with Ayurvedic practitioners who haven't done a lot of yoga and tantra, they bring
Mm.
that in and their whole world feels more complete, more balanced. So there's really a
Mm.
magic that happens when these sister sciences are practiced together consistently over time. And one thing I tell my clients, you don't have to do 20 new exciting practices every day, but if there's really just three, but you're doing these rituals consistently, there's this accumulated benefit that occurs. And I think when people work with you for a year, they have that opportunity to really put those practices into place and to have that support, that accountability, that feedback. And then at that point, those things are just what they do. It's just part of who they are, part of their lifestyle.
Right. And working with folks in just the householder environment that we might say, like everyday life, that accountability of practice is one of the biggest struggles. And in my early life, child-free, single, spiritual wanderer around the world, got to live in all these spiritual communities and had teachers, right there and got to practice for hours a day within community. It was like the accountability is just built in, as it always was in these traditions. Like culture was the accountability of your daily ritual. Everyone got up and did these rituals every day. And as these Indian traditions have come onto, you and I are both in the US, so this soil, there isn't that continuity. I mean, that's why I use the word radical. It's disjunct to have this background of practice and this background of a coherent way of seeing your everyday life that isn't just capitalism and work and the struggle of the daily grind. So having accountability of what that practice is and how you do it and coming back together and saying, this is what I'm trying and this is what I'm trying to commit to. It's so important. I mean, right? We just fall away from our mat. We fall away from our practice because life pulls us in so many other directions.
Yes. Yeah, having that support of a teacher and of a community really makes it, really anchors it in for
Mhm.
life. And then, yeah, those practices just become habitual. So yeah, I love how you shared about that. And okay, so that's coming up in the fall time, your next longer program. And in the meantime, I really love how the Sangha is available for people, your previous students, current students, future students, people who are curious to connect, ask questions, get a feel, not feel so alone with their practices. And I hear this from a lot of my clients. I'm doing my sadhana, my spiritual practice on my own. I feel like I'm just doing it by myself. But when they come together, that inspiration expands, or that relating, or maybe a little seed of something gets planted from someone else to inspire to go study something like a teaching of yoga a little more deeply. So yeah, Sangha is where it's at.
Yeah, and this particular Sangha is responding to many years, especially the COVID years, but many years of teaching in more retreat and workshop style. And then folks having these beautiful, coming to a 4-day silent meditation retreat and then going, now what? And I remember I came out of a long retreat once and I sat with my teacher at the end. I was about to fly back to the US and I sat with him and I said, now what? Like I just couldn't imagine that beautiful paradigm of silence and oneness and the love awareness that we experience when we're touching the deeper levels of ourself, and then that in this paradigm. So this is an invitation for that continuity, right? If you find your practice feeling uninspired or hard to get on your mat or hard to remember, or you want to taste again that feeling of, oh, right, I am love. That actually is the basis of my being. But I'm looking around in my life and I'm not seeing or feeling that. I want to remember that. So that's the purpose of Sangha, is if you've had these beautiful experiences elsewhere, or you're craving them and you haven't yet had them, to come together and be able to touch that in continuity.
It's so needed. People are hungry for this now, Grace. So if someone's listening and are inspired to join the Sangha, where do they go to, find out when and where to show up?
Yeah. So my website, bewholebehappy.com. And then there's a little uh, tab that says online courses, and it says Tantra Sangha. I mean, you could just look up Grace Bryant, Tantra Sangha, you can find it. So
Okay.
that it'll be a Wednesday midday. So hopefully this works with people's lunch hour, but it's 11:15 to 12:30 on Wednesdays, starting March 6th, starting in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
Great.
so you just sign up for the email list, as I said, and then we'll just send you a weekly invitation to join the Zoom link.
Thank you. Amazing. I have another question for you, Grace. So you are a mother, and how old is your child now?
He is 2.5.
Well, I think it would be valuable for people to hear about how your practice has changed, evolved since having a child. And, since he was a young baby to his age now, like, how does your practice look?
As a mother yourself, I see your laughter and your knowing look, and I want to bounce this question back to you because your
Yeah.
daughter is way older than my son. So also love to hear from you around this. Yeah, and I mean, I can even trace it back farther, like at the beginning of my conception journey, all throughout pregnancy. So Hatha yoga has been just tried and true, tantric Hatha yoga as a physical practice for me for a long time, for almost 20 years, and meditation and um, I mean, the reality of pregnancy and labor, and then the all-consumingness of being a biological mother and nursing and lack of sleep the first year and everything the body needs and consumes. Um, I think, like most mamas, people who bear children in their own body, it changed everything. It changed everything. Every reference to myself was completely different, and still is different. But I think I'm on the other side of some of that and have a lot more clarity to myself and to what my practice is today. And I know I went through um, some intense journeys of depression and big relationship shifts. And this was all in the middle of COVID, that I was also conceiving and pregnant and giving birth. So everything that was in the collective at that time. So I would say my practice was 100% different than I ever knew it to be before. And my work was to reach out to folks and to be in community with mamas and people who had had that experience, and trust that I would get it back. Like, trust that at some point I would get my practice back. I mean, that's been an anchor for me for forever, for my whole adult life. Um, so finding along the way practices that really worked. So for example, when I was pregnant, I my pregnancy was very difficult, and just in the sense that I was very sick in my body. I had to eat constantly. My weight gain was very surprising for me, and I couldn't do some of these practices that I had done for so long. And I couldn't start my morning with that because I had to eat first thing in the morning and I had to take all these supplements at different times. And I was trying to get my body to just walk, from here to the mailbox. But it was all really challenging. So I think a lot of the practice was internal. It was around the attitudes. It was around the recognition that, okay, if Tantra is actually about the here and now in this moment, and my practice is about relating with this moment exactly as it is, and finding the inspiration to continue to do that. So I can't be on my mat for 90 minutes. Maybe I can meditate for 15 minutes. Maybe I can do a chanting practice. Maybe I can do these calmer pranayamas that work in my body. So I continue to find those. I mean, through your help, you and I saw each other several times, and you definitely helped me set up some postpartum support as well. A lot of herbs that I have taken and continue to take around shifting my mood and shifting the hormones in my body to something that can make sense for me. And then just coming back to what physical practices and what mental practices um, actually work. So I know it's kind of vague, but it's basically like everything fell apart. And then I've been able to add things back and add things back. And I'm a solo parent. So, I'm the one who gets up all night when my son gets up and can't go to bed until he goes to bed. So these times that used to be so precious for me, first thing in the morning, right, on an empty stomach, and you can do all the Dali Kriya and the Uddiyana Bandha and the Bastrika Pranayama, or before going to bed and this beautiful twilight time. Like, I just sometimes don't get those times. So to rebuild um, how to hold that time sacred, even with my son, has been quite a practice. So, for example, we nursed for the first 11 months or so, and um, I used to get up. We co-slept for the first year, and so when we woke up together in the morning, I would get down on the floor and just kind of start moving my body however I was able. And then when he was ready to nurse, I would do seated pranayama and chanting, and that's just how we nursed. That was my morning practice for a long time. And playing with him on the ground and then kind of going into certain asanas or certain movements, like it was really just more in the flow of my day. And now, we sleep in different rooms and he generally sleeps through the night. And I mean, I'm a very lucky mama. He sleeps 12 hours a night. He still, knock on wood, naps a couple hours every day. So I have a little bit of quiet time there, maybe for another year, maybe not. But I'm actually able to carve out more of that time just in the last couple of months that I can reliably say, okay, if he wakes up while I'm practicing, then that's my practice. And if I get this time quietly to myself on my mat, then that's my practice. So I think it's the ever adjustment, trust in the present moment, patience in the present moment, and getting those little windows for myself. And one other piece I'll say around silence is, so I do lead silent retreats. The first year that my son was born, he attended 5 silent retreats. So he had a caretaker, and then when I was not teaching in the retreat, we would be in a separate space, and I would be parenting as well as leading the retreat. So that was a beautiful experience. And then the last 18 months, I guess, I've done some retreats separate from him. So he's been with caretakers, and I've been at a 3 or 4 day silent retreat. And I'm leading the retreat, so I speak while I'm in session, but I also get many hours a day of my own silence. And I can't imagine parenting without that. I mean, I am just such a better parent when I come back from a retreat, and I'm so much more spacious and trusting and present and patient, and like his big waves just don't affect me quite as much. Yeah, and again, I can't imagine parenting without that. So I'm so grateful that even though, me going to my own retreat to participate hasn't happened yet. I'm sure it will at some point. I still do get those anchors of getting to practice regular silence and having that be part of our journey together.
Wow. You just shared so many gems of wisdom there, Grace, and that part about taking retreat and then coming back to your child, just a better parent, more connected to yourself and to your life. So essential that it's okay to take that time away from your child, especially when you're investing in yourself in that way. And I think everything you just shared can provide a lot of freedom for parents who think about, they might be really steadfastly on a spiritual or yogic path. and become parents and have some guilt or regret that they're not attending to their practice as they once did. But I love that part how you shared about trust, like trust that your practice is what it is right now in the present moment, but it can evolve and come back to something like it was before. Like trust that that is there for you down the road. But the Tantra, the yoga now is just to be here with your child, with the experience. And that's the preciousness of being a parent. Yeah.
And that's, I think, the beauty of Tantra and why it speaks to me so much is that the path of Tantra has always been accessible for householders. I think there are a lot of other spiritual paths that are more monastic, and certainly there were monastic and very renunciate elements of Tantra as it was being built 1,000 years ago and codified and in the books and the texts that we have now. But there was always this accessible aspect of this, like the question of what's your practice? It's where is God in this moment? Doesn't matter what you're doing. It's this moment. Can you find that pause? What's called the inner asana, just that space between the inhale and the exhale. It's right here. That stillness actually never leaves you. And I think that's the truth of the practice. So it's beautiful when we get extended periods to be on our mat and to be uninterrupted. And the reality of an integrated spiritual practice is it's still happening. It's still happening right now.
Still happening. Yeah, and that bit that you shared is so essential. That part of, God is between those spaces in the breath. And Dr. Ladd talks about that as well, Grace. He says God is in that gap between the out breath and the in breath. That's where that connection happens, the aha moment, that deep peace happens in that space. And staying present to that when we can, whatever we're doing, that is truly embodying and integrating the essence of yoga and tantra and Ayurveda. Yeah.
And I think it's pretty radical because, I did learn in these spiritual communities and from, men who were single, like there is a very patriarchal, there is a very patriarchal bent to this tradition, both on the Indian side and on the American side. And so even how wrong I felt in my body sometimes because the tradition says a yogi looks like this, right? A tantrika looks like this. You should be having these practices or these relationships or these this. I don't think that's what the essence of the teachings say, but I think the collective of the tradition is still breaking from patriarchy and capitalism and how that's really taken hold, like for you and I, this is our vocation, right? Like this is how I get paid in my world. I don't choose to work for Microsoft. I choose to serve people and hopefully it also feeds my family. So to come back to like a feminine, a truly feminine, divine feminine, the mother, as the base of the practice. This is the heart of Tantra. And how much shame that I had, and I'm still moving through around that's not what a yogi looks like. You should be sitting in silence and in your Padmasana, doing your 15 rotations of Nauli Kriya. Like there is a paradigm, I think, still to break. And I'm certainly doing that work myself.
Yes. Yeah, well, you are that living example, especially for your son. And some would say that he has very good karma or he's very blessed to be born into a household where he rolls out of bed and yoga is what his first impressions are, that he comes out, he opens his eyes and mama's doing something, that's nourishing for herself and for the household. So I feel like those impressions are priceless at that young age.
Yeah, he says, Mama do kriyas? Mama make coffee? That's how we start the day. Mama get Anders milk? Mama do kriyas? Oh, Mama doing neti. And it's interesting because sometimes, if I haven't done my practice before he gets up, so if I'm trying to do it while he's awake and we have our morning routine, he'll get frustrated with me.
Mhm.
I'll roll out my mat and either he'll say, "Oh, I'm going to get my mat." "Oh, I'm doing sun salutes today," or he'll say, "Mama, don't practice. Mama, play with me." So that sometimes feels disjunct for him. He's like, "I want your attention. I don't want you to go do this practice thing." So I am also curious about how that doesn't become something that's unfavorable for him. He's like, "Oh, practice means disconnection." So how
Yes.
that works within our attachment as well.
Yeah. It's an ongoing practice of kind of watching how they respond. And my daughter's 15 years old now. And I've learned for her that if I just do what I'm doing, whether it's my practice or how I cook or herbs I'm taking, whatever it is, just keep modeling that, demonstrating it for her. And she might shun it for some years. And then she'll come around, "Mom, this Chyavanprash, this thing that you eat, like, what is this? Can I try it too?" Or, "I think I like khichdi. I never liked it, but now I like it." Or, "I think I wanna, have less meat in my diet," or whatever that is for her. She's at this age as a teenager kind of coming around and like, maybe there's something to it."
Yeah, and how's that journey been for you? I mean, you've been a yogi and Ayurvedic practitioner for 15 years as a mom. How is your
Yeah,
practice?
it's been definitely a lot of changes. Like you said, it changes, it evolves, it morphs depending on our rhythm, our rhythm
Mhm.
of the season, of the year, of our ages, whatever's happening in life. And I feel like it has changed a lot, but what's important for her and for me is that we stay connected to the rhythm of the day and of the
Mm,
season. So again, like those cornerstones, like we're having meals around the same time most days, we're going to bed around the same time. We have different practices that are consistent, and everything else in between can be variable. And I'll be okay with that, but as long as our kind of cornerstones, what keeps us grounded and in rhythm, that part feels essential. But I've found that trying to be too heavy-handed doesn't work, or trying to force her to eat certain things in her lunch that she doesn't want, it's not going to work. So sometimes I'm cooking two meals, one for me, one for her, and that's okay. But it's also not ideal to go on doing that forever. So it's a work in
yeah, that's
progress,
something.
and I'm mostly just very grateful that she's, such a good kid and curious, and she is half Indian, so she has that culture in her. So she has a lot of curiosity about the culture in general. So yeah, now's a really kind of exciting time to share these things with her.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. What a blessing that she gets to have that continuity with you and
Yes.
embrace the change of life, but try to hold that, right? The times of the day and the dinacharya and the eating with the seasons and things I know you honor in your household. And
Yeah.
I just wonder, what's that like for your doshas as well? Do you have similar doshas as your family members? Do you all eat similar things, or is that a challenge?
This is a huge conversation and always a really fun one to have, especially in a group, is how do family members of different doshas, relate when it comes to food and practices, and or even partners, how do partners relate with very different constitutions? So I'm more kapha and pitta, and my daughter's more pitta and vata. So she has more fire and air than I do. So she does have different dietary preferences and activity preferences. So in some ways, we're quite opposite. Even I'm Taurus rising, and she's Scorpio. So opposite ends of the astrology as well. So there are opposing qualities, but the love is really what always connects us, right? And it always comes back to love. So I'm just really trying to show her how unique we all are. And as teenagers, to have less judgment, more curiosity with oneself and with one's colleagues. Like just stay curious and compassionate. Because, yeah, these years there can be a lot of judgment and even meanness with kids. So navigating this has been an interesting process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're giving her such a good education, and I totally agree with you. Curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. We come back to not knowing, and how to find routine. And I don't know, but let's eat this meal at 6 o'clock.
Exactly. Yeah, just trusting in that, it seems to work pretty well. So, Grace, if people want to connect with you, they can find you on your website, bewholebehappy.com. And you offer programs mostly in Northwest Washington, but people can join online for different programs as well. And there's always one question I like to ask toward the end of these conversations, and that is, what's been on your mind lately that you're curious about, Grace, that you're kind of unfolding some understanding about, or that you find yourself talking about with your clients recently, again and again, like a theme coming up for yourself and your clients?
I couldn't bring it down to one. I feel like there's so much change, there's so much fear right now. It's a scary time to be in this world. And I feel like everyone I'm working with is going through a lot of change. This, Chinese year that we're welcoming, the year of the yang wood dragon and the fire breath. And it is unquestionably a time of great change in the world. So I think practices around disidentifying from fear, like when a fear monster arises or when there's a story or a subconscious process that just hijacks us from being in the present moment because that fear is running the show. Being able to identify that and coming back to, and in my practice, we use the question, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? What am I noticing right now? They're very simple, but I was working with someone yesterday who I've been working with for about 18 months, and we're doing one-on-one mentorship together. He's come to some retreats, and I said, if noticing isn't already the cornerstone of your practice, then it needs to be. Because if we're not noticing what's happening right now in this moment, then we're missing the whole picture, right? I can't deal with the big stuff that happens in my life if I can't physically feel my feet on the ground, physically feel that gap in between the breath, acknowledge what my emotional state is doing right now. And I notice for myself, in the big moments with my son, when we both get challenged and frustrated, he's at this wonderfully verbal age. He's so excited to be able to recognize, like, oh, I'm feeling a thing. I'm going to say the thing, and you're going to understand the thing. Wow, that's a huge evolutionary growth. And so for him, when he starts to get upset now, I'm noticing these last couple of weeks, month or so, and he says, Mama, I'm frustrated. And then we can be with that, right? Like when you can identify that and not just be totally engrossed in the flames of it, then, oh, wow, what do we want to do with that? What do we want to do with that frustrated? So it's that I feel like it's the exact same, very simple practice of noticing and naming what's happening in the moment. And that for me, when I start to get overwhelmed or feel really impatient, like, wow, we're supposed to be getting ready for bed and he's dragging his feet and he won't, whatever. Wait a minute, what's happening right now? I have an expectation, but what's actually happening is my son is just walking slowly through the living room. That's actually what's happening. Can I be with that? So that feels really important, especially as the world seems very big, unquestionably there's war, there's strife, there's killing, it's a really hard time to be alive. And as we send our prayers and practice compassion and Tonglen and these metta meditations, um, I think it's really important to not lose sight of what's actually right in front of us right now, right here, right now. That's just the essence of it.
Mhm. So beautiful, Grace. Yeah, really touching. Thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom today with all of us.
Thank you
I
so
love
much,
talking
Sarah.
with you and just look forward to seeing how your offerings continue to expand and evolve and the impact it's having on the world. And I just know that every student you touch, every client you touch, it ripples out. So, yeah,
Mm,
it's very honorable work. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much. Joy to spend this time with you today. Mm.
Grace.